Yeah, the marginal revenue became the demand curve. Let's make sure we're real careful on why that works out that way. So our situation we did in the previous chapter gave us this graph. And we called it a single price monopoly. It's really anybody that faces a downward sloping demand curve, by the way. So single price monopoly, this would apply in monopolistic competition later too. So marginal revenue function was twice as steep as the demand curve, right? And because we had to sell those prices or charge only one price. So our first case I want you to think about is perfect price discrimination. So imagine we've got a demand curve here, and this is, I guess let's just go with $10, 9, sell 1 unit, 8, you sell 2, 7, you sell 3, $6, you sell 4, and I'll just stop at 5 here. Draw something that looks like that. Okay, so a perfect price discriminator is a firm that can charge the price people are willing and able to pay for each unit that they produce. So they can perfectly price discriminate. So the first unit I have to offer at a price of $9 to sell. The second unit I can drop my price to 8, but I don't have to drop my price for the first. And so the revenue generated by the second unit is what? 8. The third unit, I have to drop my price, but only for the third unit. So the revenue generated by the third unit is now 7. And so the fourth unit, I have to offer for $6, but I can leave all the other ones right where they're at. And so the revenue generated by the fourth unit is 6. And so what I'm starting to map out is a series of lines that are all right in line with the demand curve. And so now we're kind of, in a sense, back to what we saw in perfect competition. But it's not a very competitive market. We've got one person controlling the market, or one firm anyway, controlling the market. And then it almost seems worse that they're able to extract every bit of consumer surplus out of the consumers. Now, likely to be able to happen, can you think of any industries where firms are maybe more likely than others to extract? Airlines. Okay, good. Why do you say that?
They charge different prices for the same ticket.
Yeah, it's become no mystery that people pay different prices for airline tickets now, right? I don't know if they're really able to suck out every dollar of consumer surplus out of me, but they seem to do pretty good on average. So what keeps, now let me run with your airline thing, what keeps them from probably being able to perfectly do it? What are some things that consumers do in regard to, let's really stick with airlines, that maybe would keep the airlines from having it work out perfectly?
Well, I just have a question.
Yeah.
I guess you could think about this with airlines. Like charging the different price, which I realize, like, even in the same like business class, you can still get different. But like, if you had like a first class compared to like business class, like, and they were charging different prices, would that be different since it's a different product technically?
Yeah,
I'm just asking.
that's where we're starting to mix a few things. You're right. So you get the big fat chair and you get free booze the whole trip. That's a little different product. Now that's what's kind of fun, and what we're going to do in this chapter is talk about bundling products together. So now you've got the product of getting from Kansas to Phoenix bundled together with a nice fat chair and free booze versus a smaller seat and this, but at the end of the day, part of the product's the same, getting from Kansas to Phoenix, but we're bundling it differently. And that's where some real interesting things come out on how to maximize profit. So yeah, that's certainly one thing. The bundling of things can make it different. So let's even try to stick with the coach class seats and assume that experience is the same. What else keeps an airline from being able to perfectly extract? What do consumers do with airlines, once they start to know that there's different prices out there? What's that? Choices among airlines. Now that brings in competition. Let me narrow it down to one airline, let's say. One airline, coach class. Okay, so the consumers start figuring out what their scheme is. If you book on Wednesdays, maybe you guys have heard some of this, that ticket prices are cheaper.
I heard
My parents, I was booking a trip for my parents, and I happened to, the very first time I looked, I saw ticket prices at $260 or something, right? This is for a trip that's mid-April, and I was looking a month ago, let's say, I think when I first looked, and I saw ticket prices at $260. So you know how it goes. You kind of like, oh, do you guys want to go? I'll take it. You figure it all out, and a week later, I jump back online, and the direct flight, because I wanted them to get a direct flight, instead of being $260, was $460. And so it's like, oh, a lot of consumers might be like, oh, that's darn, I coulda, shoulda, woulda, didn't, and now maybe I'll do a connecting flight or start thinking of other alternatives. Or maybe I need to jump on something real quick. I saw on the internet, it said only 3 left at this price, right? So I've done a decent amount of travel. I've kind of learned a few things over time with how the airlines work. And so my parents were kind of like, oh, did you book that flight? Did you book that flight? They kept calling me, did you book that flight? And I'm like, chill out. All right, the research shows that the least expensive price is 21 days out from the time you leave. On average, you might get screwed on that, but on average, again, 21 days out from the way you do. So we still had plenty of time. And I kept looking. I was starting to get a little worried because I looked the next week, and I did the trick of looking on Wednesdays because Wednesday prices are sometimes better than weekend prices. But I was patient and kind of relied on the data, on the research that I hopefully knew was out there. And sure enough, 2 to 3 weeks later, the $260 price came back through the same airline, in fact. And so they kind of monitor those things. And also another thing that consumers don't always think about, when they give you the little sense of urgency on only 3 tickets left at this price, they don't tell you that, oh, we're probably going to add 5 more flights before it's all said and done, right? That particular flight, they're not lying, had 3 seats left, but that's not the last plane going to Phoenix, right? So there's going to be adding a new flight, and I suspect as soon as they fill up a flight and they kind of make a judgment call like, hey, we're still a month and a half out, let's add another flight going to Phoenix on this time. Let's book another one. So then they dump a new jumbo jet with X hundred amount of seats, and they kind of start the process over. They might start low to try to gather up a bunch of seats, and then once it fills up, they start to say only 5 seats left at this price, and then so they that's their business model of how they start. So you start to think about their pricing things, and that's what we're going to do in this chapter. But to get back to my original point, the consumers start to figure out what the firm is doing, and then therefore they might not be able to extract all that consumer surplus either when there's knowledge on the other side. John?
This was more of an active travel thing. I was just going to say, whenever you try to book anything travel-wise, whenever, if you're doing it online, so researching for the first time, clear out your...
The cookies, yeah. All of that's true too, and I suspected. I did check with different computers, by the way, for that reason. And I found out it was consistent. It wasn't just my computer that they knew I was looking for those types of flights. But don't rule that out either. That can happen too.
They notice that your ID,
Right. Yep, they can alter their price. So all of that, some interesting price discrimination schemes. And so in reality, if they're successful to some extent, they can still move this marginal revenue. So if they have kind of an average price discrimination scheme that allows a little bit, then they're still making more money and charging different prices. They're altering, if you want to just kind of imagine, per the two extremes. Single price, one price only, there's the extreme. And perfect price discrimination, we may not ever get there, but we're probably somewhere in between. And the more of it we can do, the more profitable it should be, but you got to be careful. There's some caveats to that too that we'll explore. All right, let's call it a day.